Hi, and welcome to TECM 4400. This will be a Ruby on Rails tutorial set of videos where I'll walk you through how to create this initial survey that I sent out before the beginning of the semester. So basically what the app does is it's as simple as it gets. It asks the user to complete three form fields, a name, whether or not you own a laptop, whether or not what operating system you're running. And it allows the user to submit their responses, and then it gathers all the responses into a view where you can see all of the responses. Okay, so it's as simple as it gets. A user inputs data, it collects all of that data and displays all of that data. But it's really an important sort of foundational way to understand Ruby on Rails. And so I figured what better way to teach you sort of the foundations than to teach you how to build just the most simple app. And really after this first video, you'll be able to have a functioning app, and a lot of the rest of the videos will be cleaning it up and making it look presentable. So the first thing we'll do is we'll open up, and I have command line open already, so I'll close this just so we can kind of start from scratch. So this all is presupposed on the fact that you've got Ruby on Rails installed on your machine, on your laptop or desktop. The other thing I want to point out is I'm hoping most of you have laptops, because you really only want to be developing in one environment. You don't really want to be moving your app from one machine to another machine, and that's because you've basically set up a development environment on your local machine, and it works on your machine, but it may not work because the configurations and the setup may be different on someone else's machine. So that's an important thing to know as you're trying to move your app from one place to another. It's not impossible, but it can cause headaches. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open Terminal on a Mac. If you're on Windows, it's just command line, I believe is the name of the program. And what we're going to do is, again, this is presupposed that you've properly installed Ruby and properly installed Rails. So to test if you've properly installed Ruby, you can do Ruby in the command line -v, and it'll show you what Ruby version. I'm running 2.3.1, and it'll show you, if you do Rails -v, it'll tell you the same thing. Rails is 5.1.3. It doesn't matter if you have the same version of Rails and Ruby, just as long as you've got them installed on your machine. And if you haven't got them installed, go to installrails.com. You should have already done this, but if you haven't gotten it completed yet, please go to installrails.com to get Rails installed. So the first thing we'll do is I'm going to change directories into my desktop just so it's easy for me to know where I'm installing this new app. It doesn't matter where you install the app on your machine as long as you've got it installed somewhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new app. And so to create a new Rails app, we type in Rails as our first command. So basically all of our commands are going to begin with the word Rails. What happens in the next space over, or the next word over, we'll do our command. So we'll do new, and then we want to name our app. I'm just going to call this survey, just to keep it simple as possible. Maybe I'll call it survey-4400, so I'm not getting it, so it's got a little bit of more description. So I'm going to hit enter, and that just magically creates an entirely new app. And it says it's got all of these gem files installed, and it's using all of these gem files. I'll explain to you what a gem is and how all that stuff works. It's okay if you don't know what everything means at this point. So once you've installed it, it doesn't automatically put you into that directory. You still have to change directories into that particular directory. So I've created survey 4400, and I've now moved over into that folder. To test to see if this is working, what we're going to do is we're going to type in Rails. So again, all of our commands begin with the word Rails. And then I'm going to type in the word server. So basically this launches the server, and this allows you to test your app locally on your server. So to test your app locally on the server, you type in localhost :3000. If you get this page, you're in good shape. It tells you what Rails version you're using, it tells you what Ruby version you're using, and that means that you've properly created a new app. So you've created a new app, it just doesn't do anything. So we're going to keep this server running. I'm just going to open another terminal window. And I'm going to change directories into desktop, change directories into survey 4400. So what I want to do now is I want to open my survey 4400 app in Sublime Text. So on a Mac, you just drag it onto the icon. If you're on Windows, I think you can just do File, Open, and it'll allow you to open a folder. I don't want to really walk through too much at this point because it's not going to mean anything to you. So we'll just kind of leave it as it is. So here's the first magical Rails command that you'll learn, other than creating the Rails app itself. So we're going to type in Rails, and we're going to type in the word, the letter G, which is short for generate. So you could type in the word generate if you want, but I tend to, and that was spelled wrong actually. I tend to spell things wrong, so I just like to use the shorthand. So Rails G, so Rails generate. So we're going to generate something, and what we're going to generate is called a scaffold. So I'm going to type in the word scaffold. Scaffold is just like it sounds. It gives you all of the structure or base scaffolding, for lack of a better term, for your app. So it generates a bunch of template view files, a bunch of template files for your app, and it based on some variables that you have to create in a database. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a scaffold called survey. So Rails G scaffold, and then capital S survey. So whatever you name the scaffold, you want to make it capitalized. Okay, so I'm creating a scaffold called survey, and in the survey I want 3 fields. I want a name field, I want a laptop field, yes or no, do you own a laptop, and I want an operating system field. Right? So there's 3 things a user can do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look up Rails data types, and if you, this is Rails 4, so this is old. Let's see, Rails 5 data types. There's more than these because this is Rails 4, but we'll just use it. Data types are, you want to define the kind of data that you're storing in the database. Otherwise, the database is going to be confused, right? Databases and really computer programs aren't that smart or intuitive, so we kind of have to be really explicit with them. So the first thing we'll do is we will generate a scaffold called survey, and we'll create a variable called name. And that type of variable really is just text, right? It's someone types in their name, it's text. The next variable we want to include is laptop. Do you own a laptop or not? I'm just going to call it laptop. And I'm going to label it or indicate that it's a binary variable, because you either can yes, own a laptop, or no, you don't own a laptop. So there's only really 2 options that you can have for a laptop. And then thirdly, operating system. I could call it operating system. Operating system. All of your variables cannot have spaces. So you'd have to do operating underscore system. I'm just going to call it OS because that's easier to remember for me. And I'm going to, instead of calling it a text, I'm going to label this variable as a string. String and text are similar, and there's a lot of nuance between the two. The easiest way I like to think about it is Text is typically a better variable type or data type for longer strings of text. String is you just typically use for shorter strings of text. So OS is a shorter string of text, so I'm using string. Okay, so Rails G scaffold. I'm creating a generating a scaffold called survey with 3 variables: name, laptop, operating system. I'm going to hit enter. Some magical things are going to happen. You should see all of this beautiful text appear. And basically what it did, it created all of the scaffolding for our app, which is beautiful. So if you go to localhost :3000/surveys, you'll get an error, which is great. So that it's a good teaching moment. So it says pending migration error. Anytime you've made a change to your database, in this case we made a huge change. We created 3 new variables, and we created all of these new scaffolding template files. So anytime you make a change to the database, we're going to do what's called a migration. So to do a migration, we do rake, the word rake. Don't ask me why, I'm sure there's a good reason. DB, which stands for database, :migrate. So rake, you're just going to have to memorize these things, and they'll come to you the more you start to code more. But rake, DB, migrate allows us to make those changes. So when we typed in this Rails G scaffold survey and the 3 variables, this didn't actually create the variable types in our database. Only after you migrate them. So basically this is like a command saying, hey, I want to make this change, and then this is like the rake DB migrate is like the are you sure you want to continue? That's like you clicking yes. So it's like, yeah, I actually do want to create these changes to the database. So what we see is we've created a table called surveys, and that's all good. So now if you go to localhost :3000/surveys and refresh, we basically have our app. The app's working now. It fully works how we want it to work, save for a few little things. So if I clicked new survey, I could add my name. You could add your laptop, yes. Operating system, Mac OS X, create survey. Right, and I can submit it, and it can show me what I've just submitted. I can go back. I can see all of the surveys, right? So if I added another one, another test person, this person does not have a laptop, for example, so that's blank. We can see that all of the views and infrastructure or scaffolding for this application is, in fact, in place. So that's where we'll stop video 1. What we'll pick up next video is we'll learn how to change these so that they're radio buttons instead of just text, right? Because if it's a text box, you can enter anything. Someone might think it's, what kind of laptop do you own? Oh, I own a MacBook Pro, right? And so how to change these to radio buttons, how to change these to drop-down menus, and then how to style these so that it looks not great, but a little bit better, right? This looks a little bit better than this. The last thing I want to do before I wrap up is I want to kind of show you where each of these template files is housed. So if you go to App and you go to Views, after we've created in that scaffold, these views are automatically created. And so if you click Surveys, you'll see a bunch of html.erb files. Let me just quickly walk you through what each one controls. So if you click Form, that is controlling this form right here. So if I changed, for example, the label here, change the label for just as an example. So I'm going to change this label, and I refresh, that changed right here. Right, so the form, the actual form, is controlled by underscore form.html. Edit, that is if you, after you've created a survey and you want to edit it, that's this view right here, right? So you can change like editing survey, editing your response. Let's say you wanted to make it more personal. You could change the edit view, and you can see the URL. It automatically creates this great URL structure. Index is the page that shows all surveys. So all survey responses, we can change that in our H1 tag, and that changes here. New is when you create a new survey. It's this top H1 that you can change, and these permalinks. And then the show is what happens when you complete a survey. After you click create, this is the show view. Okay, so that Rails G scaffold generated all of these template files for us. Otherwise, we would have had to create these from scratch. And so that's one of the beautiful things about Rails, is that it has these great commands that allow us to automatically create these template files. And so essentially our app does exactly what we want it to do. There's just a few little UX and UI changes we need to make so that users can't enter nonsense like this or like this for particular fields. But other than that, we're in really good shape. And so that's the first video. We'll pick up where we left off in the next one.